When is the right time for people to consciously start actually investing in their health? And I'm going to caveat that with what is generally happening in the different decades of our life. So what's happening between 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50? And when is the time when you have a bit more control and ability to shift the trajectory of your health, bar any, of course, major complications or surprises?
I've never actually been asked it that way, but the way you asked it kind of makes me think about different things. The aging process, in some ways, there are some aspects of it that are moving in the wrong direction the moment you are born. In other words, the moment a fetus comes into this world, there are certain aspects of aging that are only getting worse. There are others that are not. So you have to imagine now, they were talking about different things. So I'll give you an example of each. Something that's getting worse the second you're born is the damage to your arteries. So we call this process atherosclerosis. This is what leads to heart attacks and strokes. Heart attack and stroke is the leading cause of death in the United States for both men and women, and globally for both men and women. But it takes an awfully long time. That's why you've never heard of a baby having a heart attack. That's why teenagers don't have heart attacks, and people in their 20s, it's almost unheard of they would have a heart attack. But the disease is starting right away. And we know this because when we've looked at people who have died prematurely from other causes, car accidents, homicide, suicide, and you look at their coronary arteries, you already see evidence of disease. So we know that this is happening right away, and it's simply a matter of time until it reaches a critical level that results in disease. And of course, everybody's accelerating at a different rate based on many factors: genetics, smoking, high blood pressure, metabolic health, all these other things. But point being, that's something for which you could technically argue it's never too soon to start prevention. Then there are other things in which we're actually getting better and better and better until we reach a certain point, and then we start to demise. And an example there might be sort of cognitive capacity. So we might have our greatest neuroplasticity in the first few years of life, but we're also building on that. And if we're in the right environment, we're exposed to the right things, we're actually getting, better and better and better at our fluid intelligence. And that probably reaches our peak sometime in our third decade. So that's something where, you're actually getting better and better and better, and then it slowly starts to decline. And then there are all sorts of things that are mixtures of these things. So for example, your physical capacity, your muscle mass, strength, power, type 2 muscle fibers, cardiorespiratory fitness, all of those things are also increasing in capacity. Again, depending on which of those things we're talking about, if it's, power and explosiveness, that probably peaks early in the third decade. If it's strength, that peaks a little bit later. Peak cardiorespiratory fitness, again, in your 20s. And then those things will start to decline. What's undoubtedly clear is for you and I, we're pretty much in decline. So most people listening to this are in a state of decline. And part of the objective, I think, ought to be to slow the rate of decline as much as possible. But there's another aspect to your question that I think is very important, right? Which is, at what point should you start putting effort into this? And that's a very difficult question because it encompasses a couple of things. When you talk to a person, let's do this as a thought experiment. You talk to a person the day before they're going to die. I mean, they would give anything and everything they have for more chance at life. Despite how high their motivation is, there's no runway left. Conversely, if you went into a high school and talked to a bunch of freshmen and said, I've got the program for you that is going to add 15 years to your life,